Deep Orbit is very representative of similar style city building simulation games. While it resembles many of these micromanaging theme games, it certainly mixes in some unique originality to stand out from the rest. With gameplay divided among 3 base categories of mechanics choices, player progression, and random events, it was our goal to ensure that the game is as realistic and factual as possible, with also being an educational experience for the player. While our original intent was to have those base categories of gameplay revolve around a strong foundation of story-driven content, we are confident in our transition to a more strategic and mechanical approach of gameplay for our final outcome.
Deep Orbit's main mechanic is resource management. Players build drones, satellites, and space stations to collect resources. Players must also research new technologies to upgrade their infrastructure, complete arcade-like minigames that occur during gameplay, and eventually manage the stress levels of the personnel serving as crew on their space station. Managing the infrastructure and crew requires players to carefully balance their resource generation and resource consumption. A player who doesn't plan ahead may quickly become overwhelmed. This focus on micromanagement and planning leads to a rather frantic playstyle that our testers frequently describe as addictive.
In making Deep Orbit, we knew we wanted a more realistic approach on how things interacted with each other in the game. Even though sending off a spaceship into deep orbit is a little more futuristic than not, we wanted to apply real causality in the game. The space station cannot function without crew on board, satellites cannot produce resources without a power supply, failing random events cause a loss in resources. Once we created individual effects to happen throughout the game, we then started to integrate them into one cohesive system, where eventually it felt like everything in the game somehow affects everything. It was amazing to see how at first the game played too simplistically and how it evolved into something where you always need to be thinking about the next step. The process of making everything work individually first and then figuring out a way for it all to be cohesive, we feel really made the development process a success.
Originally, our concept of the game was simpler in some aspects and more complicated in others. Infrastructure units were intended to be fully customizable, giving the player more control of their stats and appearance through the loadout system. We simplified this system so now their appearance is only changed based on research tiers, and there are only a few options for loadouts. Random events were going to add story elements and give players choices that would affect other areas of the game. Now random events are minigames we made to fit the theme. This was the biggest change as we had to come up with 3 whole new minigames, each with their own balancing and mechanics.
There were several elements of the Deep Orbit project that we wished would have made it into the game, but could not utilize or complete due to the time allotted and workload. Some would have taken up too much of our time, best used elsewhere, like the full documentation of our code and an extension to the drone and satellite modification system. Others were left behind because, frankly, they no longer had a place in the game, like a save load system or micromanagement of crew aboard the station. Of these items, the save load system was the biggest headache, largely because of how much time was spent on trying to make it work for a game that, in the end, should only take a couple of hours to complete.
Starting off with creating managers in Unity has been a large portion of what we know now will be very helpful in the future. Another essential skill has been to use loads through static references, and those 2 specifically have been a key component to making our jobs as designers easier for us, and to make changes when necessary a lot easier as well.
Deep Orbit has many cool features that showcase the hard work that went behind the scenes to make them happen. One feature in particular was the novel material. Novel material was used throughout the entirety of the game, beginning in the researching stages, throughout the minigames, reusing drones that were used in the early stages of the game, upgrading infrastructures, and all the way till the very end of the game to assemble and send off the colony ship.